Welcome back to another episode of Twisted Metal Companion. I'm Peter. On the other side of the mic there, I don't know if he's being lemon pepper seasoned, but it's Tyler. How you doing, sir?
Good. I prefer the hickory barbecue.
Yeah, maybe I should have taken references from like episode 3 or 5, but today have a special episode, as I always say. But we have, for the second time, we have another director. Jude Weng joins us, who directed episode 3 and 5, as you heard. How you doing, Jude?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yes, a pleasure to have you. So much to talk about. Let's get to know you first a little bit because there's not a lot. At least what I looked up, there's not a lot about you. I did find out you're uh from Taiwan. You were born in Taiwan, Taiwanese born.
Yeah, I was born in Taiwan, raised in San Francisco, California.
Well, when did you come to or when did you go move to San Francisco?
I moved to the States when I was 3 years old. So, but definitely felt like an outsider growing up in San Francisco because instead of living in a place like Chinatown, my dad had us live in a neighborhood called the Castro District, which we know it now to be a fabulous gay mecca. But it wasn't that when I was growing up. In fact, it was kind of a poor, working class, like Irish Protestant neighborhood, and they did not like, the gay people moving in, and they hated even more Chinese immigrants moving in. So it was actually a pretty rough childhood. Like I grew up with, truck drivers pissing in bottles and tossing piss bottles at me as I was walking to school. So
Wow, it's
yeah, but look at
terrible.
that. It made me
I mean,
super resilient and really
yeah,
helped out becoming a director because it's like I have seen some real shit. So the shit we deal
right.
with on set is really not such a big deal.
Wow, the opening of Always Be My Maybe, kind of painted a different picture if anyone saw that. I think that was opened up in San Francisco with kind of like young Ali Wong and Randall Park, I feel.
Right. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was different San Francisco in the 70s for sure.
Oh yeah. It sounds like it. And that's where you spend most of your time, would you say?
Yeah, that's where I grew up.
So, inside baseball here, we're actually recording this on the night of a Super Bowl. You're not game watch or like score
Of
watching?
course, I'm a big 49ers fan, but I didn't want to miss up this opportunity to
Oh
do a
wow.
podcast with you guys. So tick tick, let's go. I gotta watch the
Yeah,
Super Bowl.
okay. Fair enough. Like I'm here for the Usher concert myself. Um,
I can confirm Taylor Swift has landed. She's
Yeah, she
there.
has landed. Yeah,
there
it's
you go.
so impressive.
Uh,
How did she do 4 shows in Japan and then turn around, get on a flight, and then show up at the Super Bowl? That's pretty
yeah,
special.
it's pretty good. I think the kids say she's built for this. I think that's an expression nowadays.
Right.
Um, growing up in San Francisco, like, where did the love of like, how did you decide early on you wanted to get into like making movies?
Well, like many immigrant children, if your family has a business, you become an indentured servant. And so I was an indentured servant growing up at my father's diner. So it was either I was either at school or I was either working at the diner. And so I actually, unlike other kids, I didn't go home after school. I didn't get to watch TV. I didn't go to the movies on the weekends. I just worked at the diner all the time. But when I was 11 years old, I heard all these kids at school talk about this movie called Indiana Jones. And it was all everybody could talk about, how great it was. And I thought, man, what is this concept of a movie? I've got to go see it for myself. So I did something pretty ballsy. I stole money from the cash register from our diner. I cut school and I took a bus to the Regency 3 Theater on Van Ness. And it was, it had been out for several months. So there was nobody at the theater. It was a matinee. And when I walked in, like, by the way, I had $20. I think I just like threw it at the ticket person and ran in because I was afraid like some truant officer would come and capture me and take me back to school. So I go running in, and it was a huge theater. And remember, I'd never been to a movie before. So I sat down in the front row, and these red velvet curtains opened up and that movie started. And you know how amazing that movie is. That movie gives you all the feels. And you remember that moment where the giant ball is rolling towards, Indy?
Mhm.
I jumped out of my chair and hid behind several rows of theater seats because I thought I was going to get crushed. So watching Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark gave me all the feels in a way that I feel like I've been chasing that ever since. as a storyteller and a filmmaker. And my favorite like genre as a director is action comedy. And so I've been just chasing that all my life.
That's amazing. So that's like your first movie event experience.
Yes. And then to
Pretty
see
amazing.
that movie, like it really shaped me. I hope one day I get to meet Steven Spielberg and tell him that because of that movie, it put me on the course of wanting to be a visual storyteller. And I've been chasing that ever since.
That's amazing. Do you have a favorite installment of Indiana Jones?
Oh, come on. It doesn't get better than the first one.
Okay.
I have used that first film in so many ways. Not only do I rewatch it because I enjoy it, I teach a lot now and I mentor a lot of emerging directors and I make them watch that movie and I actually ask them questions like how many oneers or mini oneers are there in the movie?
Wow.
Yeah, so
Quiz
I
'em.
love been just observing the film from a very academic standpoint. It's really fun.
See, we didn't prepare for this interview like that. I mean, when we get to your episodes and start breaking those down, we will.
Okay.
Because
I can't wait to talk to you guys about my episode because, it very frequently as a episodic director, I'm so blessed to have a journeyman career. I'm just directing episodes after episodes. I don't really always get the chance to talk to people who've watched it and really talk to them about what did they like, what stood out for them. Because, our feedback from viewers is meaningful and it's very rare to get it. So I'm super excited to talk to you guys.
okay, we got the hint there, so we'll keep the other things a little bit light. Tyler,
Okay.
anything you want to bring up not Twisted Metal related?
Oh, I mean, I'm curious. Like you said, going from like show to show, what do you find is kind of consistent about coming on to just a new show? And if you have any stories about like coming onto a new show and being faced with something you hadn't run into before, at different productions.
Yeah, that's a great question, Tyler. There's sort of a joke saying at the Directors Guild, which is, as an episodic director, you're a guest in someone else's house. Bring a bottle of wine and don't rearrange the furniture. And I think at the beginning of my career as a director, I perhaps followed that belief and that rule a little too rigidly. You feel like you're coming into somebody else's, house and their rules and their, boundaries of what they want visually and creatively. But it's actually not entirely true. When they say don't rearrange the furniture, what does that really mean? I feel like my job now as an episodic director is, yes, I am giving you your show that you're familiar with. But my job is also to really read the script carefully and think about special ways in which I can elevate it. Because otherwise, it's just another basic episode. And that's definitely, I think, for like shows that have gone on to season 3 and season 4 and season 5, right? Like there's a point where I feel like the episode can even become kind of mundane. And so a fresh director and a fresh perspective can actually bring and elevate some really, new interpretations that give the episodes and the show that extra little lifeblood that it needs or could use. So yeah, I think that saying is not entirely true. And it's certainly not true for season 1. I feel like for season 1 shows, and Twisted Metal is such a great example of that, like, oh, like you have nothing to lose by swinging for the fences, right? Like, why be so careful? And it was really sorry to already be talking about Twisted Metal, but like it's so exciting to be a part of season 1 show because there are actually fewer rules. There's more opportunities for you to, sort of help decide the language, especially when episode to episode the storylines are so different.
Yeah, I
But back to your question, Tyler, any fun stories to share? I mean, I've been so blessed. I've actually had an amazing last year. Like my last, 18 months have been so interesting as a director. I went from like Only Murders in the Building to Party Down to Twisted Metal to Vancouver where I worked with Bob Odenkirk on a show called Lucky Hank. And then I did Quantum Leap. Like I get to do all these different genres as a director, and I do that very intentionally. I'm very careful about what shows I select because I really pride myself in being a Swiss Army knife of a director.
That's amazing. And like the first part of that answering Tyler's question, I want to answer like that Shia LaBeouf gif of him standing up and applauding, because you're so right. Like I was very fortunate to get my very first screeners of season 4 of Cobra Kai. And as such, like, you kind of write like non-spoiler reviews and things of that nature. But what I like to do is I like to read the credits, who wrote this episode, who directed this episode, and when it's a new name, I love it. And the reason,
Mm.
because like what you said, if it's like the same directors that return, which is great, but they have a certain way, and we've kind of come accustomed to that way, and their shots and their visuals, bringing a new set of eyes. We're getting the same locations, but maybe the setup is from a different angle, from a different vantage point, makes the world feel a little bit more big,
Yes.
seeing a different angle that we haven't seen before. So I love that.
That's exactly right. Just no spoilers, but I'm in Montreal currently, directing a couple episodes of a CBS show called Ghosts. And it's a season 3 show, and I love it so much. I'm a huge fan of the show. And because I'm a huge fan, I know how they use the sets. So it was really fun for me. There was one scene that takes place in a location that they film all the time. It's the living room in this giant mansion. And I just blocked it a little bit differently and had the actors use the space a little bit differently. And it was a real joy to even have the crew support. They're like, thank God you didn't have make everybody sit in the couch. Like you used the room differently for once. And they were actually thanking me. Like the lighting people were thanking me because they got to use the room differently. So that was really, it's nice when, you're supported, but by the way, that doesn't always happen. Sometimes you walk onto a show and you want to do something a certain way, and they're like, yeah, we don't do that. And guess
Right.
what? You got to respect that because it's their house. I'm just the guest.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. With Quantum Leap, was that a show you were already familiar with? Did you know about the Scott Bakula version? Or
Oh, I definitely knew about the Scott Bakula version because later on, when I was a teenager, my life changed pretty dramatically, and I did finally get to watch some TV. And so I was definitely familiar with that version, and I loved that version. It was really a fun show. Science fiction is a genre that I actually don't get to do too much. So when I heard about Quantum Leap, I chased it. There's some shows I chase as a director, and that was one I chased for so many reasons. Shoots in LA, it's science fiction, but not only is it science fiction, each episode, Dr. Ben Song is leaping into a different period, a different location, and that allows you to try yet another layer of genre on top of a science fiction, action dramedy. And so, for example, the first episode of Quantum Leap I directed was sort of an homage to Shutter Island. So it was like 1950s, really exciting thriller type textures, really beautiful color palettes, of this insane asylum for the 1950s. So that was so fun to lean into that noir style. I actually coined a phrase. I called it quantum noir because I
mm,
wanted to come up with a really distinct look but also made sense for the show.
yeah, and I mean, I love Raymond as the lead too. Like that's
Isn't he
just
amazing?
yeah,
He's
it's
such a
great.
great actor.
I was fortunate enough to be a guest on the Quantum Leap podcast. I believe it's the after show on YouTube. And
Yep.
so I was a part of, I believe, episode 103, but whichever episode that was, that was also the episode that they included Raymond's interview with. And so I felt like, like it was just kind of, it just all worked out. I got asked to be a guest, and then the lead happened to be on the same episode for an interview.
So
Um,
cool.
so the Quantum Leap, I feel there was going to be a good segue, but I just kind of I'll jump into it. One of your other projects that I watched and I had a really good time with, and you mentioned you directed action, um, well, and Raiders of the Lost Ark, but Finding Ohana,
Oh,
you know,
yes.
yeah, I see Goonies written all over it, right? There's a few. You got Ke Huy Quan in it, and then also a little Pili,
Yeah,
Pili,
Peely was the
Pili,
little girl.
yeah, and
Her real name is Kea Peahu, but the character's name is Peely. And yes,
Pili.
she was 12 years old
Wow.
when she started in that movie, her first movie. And as you know, Ki Kwan, I have a great story about how we got Ki Kwan in the movie, by the way. But we got Ki Kwan in our movie as well. And there was this really beautiful moment on set when Key came to visit and was also acting, he said, I really feel like I'm passing on the Goonies baton because my first movie was Temple of Doom and I was 12. And here's Kea, her first movie, and she's 12. So yeah, it
Yeah.
was a pretty amazing experience.
She has that one line, "Hey, you guys," I was just all like, yeah, it's,
By the way,
I,
we
yeah.
intentionally put in so many Easter eggs for both Indiana Jones and Goonies, like throughout that whole movie. We did a screening at the Academy Museum last year, and I told the audience, like, I think there's like 17 Easter eggs in the
Oh,
film. So for hardcore, like, lovers of Goonie and Indiana Jones, if they could find all the Easter eggs in our movie, that is a homage to those two wonderful films.
oh gosh, now I feel I have to do that myself, kind of go back and rewatch. I might have to watch the indie movies again as a refresher.
I'll give you one fun one is it's in the credit sequence with Kiwi Kwan when it cuts to his little like intro card and he has a vintage uh baseball cap that's just like when you first meet him as Short Round.
Oh wow. Oh
Yeah,
okay.
and
Wow.
he puts it
That's
on
cool.
backwards. He
Yeah.
has it, he turns it, and he puts it on backwards.
Yeah, I'll have to look for that. I really enjoyed it. For anyone that might be interested in checking it out, I don't want to spoil anything, but did not expect to cry at the end. It-
Oh, well,
There's
no spoilers, but
yeah,
it becomes incredibly emotional. And I think it
yeah.
really does take people by surprise. And Peter, thank you so much for watching it. That's really nice of
Yeah.
you.
My daughter just turned 5. I think it might be a little long to keep her attention span, but that's something I definitely want to have them check out because Peely, she's just so I love that the one line. She's like, I'm progressive, or whatever it was. There's a lot of great moments, and it does like it just gives me like the Goonies feels. But what I love about it is also the inclusion of the mom and grandpa and how very much a part of the story they are as well.
Yeah.
Whereas in Goonies, you saw him in the beginning and you saw him at the end. That's really it. So Ohana family, right? Like so it's
Right.
very, very much a family movie.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm so proud of that film. Yeah, it took me a long time to finally get to direct a movie, and I'm really proud that it's that one.
Yeah, a lot of people have Netflix, so hopefully you guys, people tuning in at home, go check it out on Netflix. It's a great family film. Very funny. Casper, that kid, he's funny too. Like I think there's some sort of stigma out there with like child actors, but I think a lot of them just have it. But also I think it also comes with great directors. Being able to be patient and directing, young people.
So I have a fun story to tell you about Finding Ohana. So we very intentionally wanted to cast Hawaiian kids, like real local kids. So even though it's Netflix and Netflix is a big international corporation, and we did do an international search, we were really set on trying to find as many locals as possible. So we were really happy to find, a Kea Peahu, Lindsay Watson, and Alex Iono. And all of them, were doing different things. Kea was a dancer. Alex was a singer. Lindsay was doing modeling and auditioning, but none of them had starred in a movie. And I don't think they even had on-set experience. I think my movie was their first on-set experience. So here's a fun story. The week before we were to begin rehearsals, I call Kea's mom and I'm like, hey, how's Kea doing? Is she excited about our first rehearsals next week? And Sonoy goes, Jude, Kea's terrified. I'm like, why? What's wrong? And she said, well, she hasn't memorized the whole movie yet. Guys, it never occurred to me that I needed to tell the actors, you don't memorize a script from beginning to end like it's a fucking book. Sorry, can I swear?
Yeah, it's Twisted Metal.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm like, yeah, it's like you don't have to do that. Like day by day, we do 4 to 5 pages a day. That's all we shoot. So, and by the way, you never shoot a movie in order. In fact, all our New York scenes were shot dead last.
Wow.
So once Kaya's mom learned that, she told Kaya was like, oh my God, thank God. The moment we had casted her, she'd been trying to memorize the whole fucking script from first page to last page. Poor kid.
Yeah.
So
That's a
yeah,
lot.
I'm so glad I called the week before because then it made me realize, holy shit, this week of rehearsal, I actually need to turn it into a filmmaking boot camp So that's exactly what I did. I'm like, guys, I'm going to talk you through what a day looks like. What's a mark? What does it mean to open up to camera? I basically taught them Film School 101. We start with a master, the widest angle possible, or even a super wide. And then we go to our next sizes. You're going to be repeating those same lines again and again for different pieces of coverage. What does it mean to be over the shoulder? You know what I mean? Like all of this really basic stuff. But we couldn't take it for granted. They had to learn what it was, otherwise it would be overwhelming. I also very intentionally hired people that were family people. I wanted the children to be surrounded by parents. I wanted them to be surrounded by a lot of love and support. And we had, I only needed to say it once because I had the best fucking crew in the world. But when we had a big crew meeting, I said to everybody, look, we're all seasoned professionals here, but let's not take for granted that this is the first film for our three leads, and let's really include them in the process. Really help them. You're going to be their greatest teachers. And in fact, let us teach them in a way that forevermore, for the rest of their lives, they're going to be spoiled by this incredible memory of making this beautiful film with this beautiful environment. And that's exactly what our set was like. Our set felt like a big group of like aunties and uncles and people like really watching out for the kids. And I'm telling you, by the end of the first week, I had the camera operators coming up to me like, this is their first movie. These kids are like pros. Like they picked up so fast. They were such amazing learners. And we just, yeah, it was just truly an extraordinary experience.
Again, Goonie lovers, and all that stuff. You get all the even National Treasure. And I don't know if this is what you guys were going for, but I also love like I guess you'd call them flashbacks, because they'll reference like what are those characters, Robinson and Brown, and
Yeah,
I love,
Robinson and Brown and Monks, and we did a
yeah,
whole drunk history thing.
it's so funny. And see, I'm not familiar with that, but I know what it is, and
Yeah.
well, I was thinking like Princess Bride, like it's the grandfather reading, and it's you still kind of their voices. But I just love how they're just as sassy as like Pilly tells it, stuff.
Yeah.
Those all of them really committed, and I think that kind of like it's kind of like the thing where you get like you need some levity in something that's so scary or just so heavy or whatever. It's kind of like that, but there's nothing, there's no levity needed, but just a little break and just some silly comedy is kind of sprinkled in for I think it's fun for the kids as well.
Yeah, that's
So
awesome. Thank you.
so
Thank you.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So Twisted Metal. So
Yes.
how we kind of talked about it's being like been the first season. How early, if at all, are you included in like the pre-production and things of that nature?
Yeah, as an episodic director, there's actually a pretty routinized process. You arrive on location or you arrive on your first day of prep and you have all your scripts, and then you just have meeting after meeting after meeting. You have the concept meeting where the head of every department is sitting there and we're all getting to know each other for the first time. We're kind of doing a page turn, talking through some, ideas and things that we're seeing on the page from every department, you can imagine, from special effects, visual effects, hair and makeup needs. I hope, is it okay? I don't mean to spoil anything. I think we can talk about
Yeah,
things because
absolutely.
come
Yeah,
out.
it's been out.
So, for example, I have so many emails about that guy who basically
Tries to
kidnaps.
rape Chondo.
Yeah, basically. Okay, we knew the opening shot would be on his feet. I wanted a low angle shot and you would see John getting dragged. And I wanted this motherfucker to be scary as shit. So I was like, give him the most disgusting toenails you can give him. And so that's the opening shot, right? Like when this is your introduction to the character, is seeing those disgusting feet. Anyway,
Yep.
so we start to get into these really interesting details, giving people a heads up of what specialty things they might need for my block. And then from after the concept meeting, then you're going to location scouts, and you're just it's one meeting after another. Like from the moment I wake up, from the moment I go to sleep, and even as I'm half sleeping and answering texts, it's all about, information exchange so that you can get everything you could possibly want on the day of your shoot.
Wow. Holy cow. And then and there's a writer on set as well, right?
Yes, well, in our case, because it's a season one show, and MJ's the showrunner, he really was such a huge part of like I actually don't even remember the actual writer of my episode, but season one show, so there he was. And quite honestly, I'm actually so happy to have the showrunner on set because frequently, what's the writer doing? The writer has their opinion, but they're also there to service their showrunner. So sometimes they're like, oh, I'm not sure what my showrunner wants. They're second guessing themselves, which only creates, challenges because all I'm really looking for is an answer, right? I want an answer. I want to make the showrunner happy. And if the showrunner is happy, I'm going to be happy. Now, from show to show, there's some shows where you are really given permission. They actually say, go make your movie,
Mm.
meaning we're going to interfere very little. So I'll give you an example. I directed a show called Shameless, and John Wells very famously, like, no writers allowed on set. It is the director's medium, and the directors have their chance to make their vision. And so it's a joy when you get to be on a set like that because then you're not always looking over your shoulder. Did we like that? Did we like that? Did we like that? Right? And I don't mean to say that that's, a chore or a bother. That's the game. But I will say, like working with MJ, so frequently we would just look at each other and we both knew the answer. And so it was a joy to work with MJ because I just felt like we were almost always on the same page. He's really a wonderful showrunner, and I'm so proud of how our episodes turned out.
Yeah, and it's his first time doing so,
I know he
so
was great. He was
yeah.
really decisive, which is fantastic.
And that's kind of what you want, right? Like, especially somebody that runs a show, but anybody with like anybody that's kind of near the top, you want them to know what you like. You want them to be able to answer your questions if you have something, not like, I don't know, what do you think, right? Like, I think that's just something I just learned on SmartList. Like, they kind of brought that up. It's just like, yeah, if you want to be in charge of something, you got to be able to answer people's questions and not just be so indecisive. I don't know. What do you think?
Yes.
So,
Well, and then sometimes, again, this is part of the job, so in no way am I complaining, but they say art is never made by a committee, right?
mm,
But TV's just a different kind of beast. We have to service it's commercial art. And so for people who complain too much that like, oh, it gets over noted, that's just part of the process. You have to be prepared to deal with it. It can be pleasant, it can be easygoing like it was on Twisted Metal or on some other shows. Like I won't name this show, and it wasn't even a bad show. Like I actually didn't mind it, but there were 16 writers on set.
wow.
And so after every take, I would just pause and I would just let them talk and let them talk it out because they couldn't come to a consensus, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. That's
yeah.
a lot. I can see for something like that. I mean, it's a really big show. I mean, I don't know. I won't go there, but just kind of thinking about like during the strike and all the things that they were trying to basically get rid of on the writer side, like no writers on set. It's just like what? But if you guys are gonna improvise and kind of change things on the fly, but I mean, I'm just glad that a fair deal was made and that's pretty much behind us now. Um with episode 3, a lot of it was Stone's backstory, and
Hmm.
we also, gosh, we get a little bit of a, oh, this is where, no, was it episode 5 where Stu meets Sweet Tooth? No, I'm gonna mix them up.
Yes, yes. 5 is where Stu meets Sweet Tooth, but 3 is also where we start to get to know Stu a little bit more as well.
Stu a little bit more, and I believe this is also the episode where Quiet also sees Loud again.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Oh
So
yeah.
let's kind of start with Stone. Just like since there's really no dialogue and it's something that you have to kind of like really focus on, but there's that part where Stone looks at a picture of his father, special agent, something Stone. Is this a man who's just like he felt pressure? He never really got to be as close as he was to his dad, somebody he admired, and just felt was in his shadows, his life, his
Oh,
whole life.
you're so good, Peter. You're totally right. You just nailed all of the subtext we were hoping to achieve with just that little moment. Absolutely. And the fact that his father was an FBI agent, and here he is sort of being called a mall cop. And then you start peeling back the layers of his story where like nobody seems to think he's legitimate, right? Like from the teenage girls that fucking neuter him in that opening
Yeah.
scene, like I mean, it was so hysterical. And by the way, when I was directing that scene, the girls were like, we're coming off really mean. I'm like, the meaner you are, the funnier this thing is. So and they were like, okay, we could do that.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about the opening scene real quick because while filming in New Orleans, it's like it's a beautiful city. It was hot as fuck while we were filming there. And so in that scene, Stephanie gets tased and she has to fall on the floor, as does Anthony, right? The ground was so hot. They jumped up. They're like, holy shit. Like there was no way they were going to lie on that ground. So we actually had to ice the ground. We took out like 50-pound bags of ice and set it down where we
Jeez.
knew they had to fall. And as soon as I called cut, they would be jumping up because the ground was already fucking hot.
Yeah, that's amazing. So like when you guys or when you guys have that, kind of that moment where like, damn, it's too hot. What can we do? Ice. How long did that something like that take? And what do you guys do in the meantime?
Well, thank goodness we had a wonderful AD because what does an AD do? All they're doing is timing all the little pieces of the machinery so that everything can be timed perfectly. So immediately after rehearsal, actors then go to the makeup trailer and wardrobe. So we know we're gonna have 20 minutes. We also know the cameras need about 20 to 30 minutes to set up. So we're just icing those spots for 20 minutes. And like we had to replace them because it was melting so fast.
Right. Oh, oof. And then the humidity on top of that too.
And the humidity on top of that. And by the way, that weather is so difficult for like special effects makeup. Like for example, the creepy guy with the nasty toenails. Like we had all kinds of like prosthetics and stuff on him, and it was just sliding off like, cheese off of a grilled cheese sandwich. Yeah.
It it's been a few months since I had spoken with Stacy Perry, who did who's a, special effects makeup head. Wasn't there? Didn't that gentleman also have a stunt double? So like, you guys had to get two people to look like that
Yes, exactly, exactly. Oh my God, guys, I have a hilarious picture somewhere of Anthony Mackie
with them.
putting arms around the stunt double wearing the gas mask around his dick
Yeah,
and the actor with the gas mask on his dick.
you may have shared it. I remember
Did he
sharing it.
share it? Oh my
I
God, I love that
yeah, yeah.
picture so much. It's so funny. It's
So
amazing.
I
somebody
think I may
showed
have.
it.
Did
Was
he
that
did
I
he
think I may have mentioned it during one of those recaps that if you can sell those gas masked underwears, I think you got something.
Oh, that's so amazing.
I,
Yeah.
I think he's right. And now,
And
I,
go ahead.
just an aside, because I didn't like extensively look at the other shows that you've been a part of. How different was this opportunity for you? Like just the tone of the show.
Um, what I got to do on Twisted Metal is my sweet spot as a director because I love to blow shit up. Like, let me blow a lot of stuff up. Let me have some blood effects. Like, I love that kind of stuff. I feel like a kid in a candy store. So, like a show that I've been chasing as a director is The Boys and Gen V.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
I love those two shows so much. And yet I can also turn around and do Lucky Hank with Bob Odenkirk because again, I love being that Swiss Army knife. I love being able to dust off all of my tools as a director. And when you use a push in a horror film and you're pushing the dolly close in somebody's face or doing it in a drama, it's the same move, but the emotion and the purpose is so different and the intention is so different. And so I kind of nerd out on what I can do with the camera to tell the story. And obviously, action comedy just gives you the biggest opportunities and the more organic reasons to move the camera. There's some shows, and Ghost, for example. Again, I mentioned I love this show, but it's not a show that moves the camera that much, because the jokes are flying so fast. There's so much tonnage. And as a result, if you have too many camera moves, it actually is really bad for editing, right? Like if you're doing a camera move, but you need to cut between a two
Mm.
shot to a developing master, that's not so great. It's better to have your master be still, and then the edit will work so much smoothly. Oh, so much more smoothly. So, you know what I'm saying? So, even though I love moving the camera, like most importantly, I love servicing my story. What does my story need? What does it need? And then
Mm.
from there is how I build my shots.
And it sounds like you're pretty
Right.
conscious about like your setups too for the editors.
Oh yeah. Oh, very much so. Um, Prior to becoming an episodic director, I directed competition game shows for 16 years.
Mm.
So I actually my very, very beginning, I was like directing music videos, and it was like the late 90s. It was very hard to find work as a female director. Like back then, I think 1% of television was directed by women.
Wow,
1%.
that's
Yeah, and
that's
half a
wild.
percent of movies were directed by women. These were statistics released by the DGA in 1999.
Yeah.
So the genre of competition reality TV was new and coming up, and they were much more open to hiring women. So I worked on the first season of Survivor as a challenge producer. And the
Awesome.
showrunner on that, yeah, thank you. I actually have a notebook somewhere where I actually came up with the term the tribe has spoken. That's in one of my notebooks.
There was probably about 10 years during my childhood where we watched every season of Survivor, and as a family, we would bet on who would be the winner every year.
Amazing. Did you watch season one?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay.
We went back and watched it like a few years ago, kind of like just going and checking in on like favorites that we had, and oh, the it just feels so much like it's like a more of like a documentary, like it feels
Yes.
grittier and realer. Like everyone's just kind of like, what do we do on an island? They're not all strategizing, people are just kind of like hanging out, like this kind of
Yep.
sucks. It's hot
Yeah.
and sandy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a pretty special one to be on. Yeah, I got to live in Borneo, and it was one of the wildest jobs I've ever had. But in working on that show, the director, a guy named Scott Messick, he had come from like directing like huge sports events. He directed, segments for the Olympics. Like this guy did really big stuff. And I loved how he worked. I loved his vibe. And so I sort of like chased working on shows with him so I could observe him directing. And he was very kind. He let me direct some stand-ups for season one of Survivor as well. So I'd be the person with a little ENG crew and Jeff Probst. He'd be like, "Hey Jeff, let's talk about Pagong Tribe for episode 5." So it was really fun to direct those kinds of segments. And from there, I grew as a competition game show director. And then I was directing shows that had 16 to 32 camera coverage. And so I'm sitting in a truck calling a live, it's called live to tape cut. And so I'm really building my experience as a director, but from an editorial standpoint, because that's what matters in the end, right? What ends up in your cut matters. So I have a question for you guys. I feel that it's really important as a director, not only to do your basic coverage, but like really think about shots that not only, tie moments together or really say something about a character, but something that is outside the norm of your regular coverage. And in our vernacular, we call them specials. So I have a question for you since you watched Twisted Metal very closely. What did you think? Do you notice these sorts of specials that I basically stay up late at night dreaming about?
Are you talking about as an example, like in episode 3 when when Shepard kind of enters the scene, sees Mike, sees Stu, and is handed the map, and you kind of go through the car and then up and then kind of pan Agent Stone. Is it something like that?
That's an example. I guess I'm wondering, like, as a viewer, if these
Hmm.
kinds of extra shots, like, if you notice them, if
Just in general.
yeah, in
You
general,
weren't
like,
looking for examples. Yes, I do. I do.
yes, okay, that's
So
nice to know.
like
Yeah.
It's
yeah,
worth it.
Yeah, and
like
and I
wonders,
think especially it something like Twisted Metal where uh it always feels like active. You know, you're not like too much. Uh, an example of just like other kind of sitcom shows where it's like set the camera down, people just come in, say what they want to say, and then they're gonna leave. Someone might mill about eating chips while they do it. But in like Twisted Metal, it's the camera's moving, things are happening. People in the background are actually part of the story, like something to pay
Yeah.
attention to.
More
Yeah.
engaging. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's always something to look in, like just because like MJ was such a big DNA of what Cobra Kai is as well. I think without him, there's something missing, and so I just thought, him with that background, I knew we were gonna get things that wasn't put on screen just for it to look cool. I knew that it was also going to tell a story. Anything on screen is deliberate, right? It's on purpose. There was an intent for it. So
Yeah.
that's just why I was really excited for it. And pardon, I should have had a drink too. But no, I am. And oneers, I don't often realize it's a oneer at first because purpose of them is to show you kind of everything, right? Going on and the way it's staged. And then I may realize, oh, there were no cuts. And so
Yeah.
I do kind of pick up on these things because I think, like there's a certain style from certain directors,
Yeah.
and maybe there are some directors who don't move the camera as much, and there's just a certain focus. But I do kind of like seeing some of that stuff.
Just
Was
to
that the
jump,
question?
yeah, yeah,
Is that
that's
that you had
great.
for us? Okay.
I don't know if you follow me on Instagram, but it was actually something I posted when my episode of Lucky Hank came out with Bob Odenkirk. At the end of my episode 105, there was a scene with Bob and his wife, Mireille Enos, played by Mireille Enos, and they've had a really difficult night, fraught with all kinds of reveals and embarrassing emotions and outbursts. And there's some tension between them as they're washing dishes. But then she finally takes his hand and she says, "Let's go to bed." And she takes his hand and she walks out. And I could have just ended the shot there of them walking out of the kitchen, but I knew I wanted to leave the last visual to be something built with a little tension in it. So I built a special. So as they're walking out of the kitchen, in the extreme foreground, I have a glass of wine with a woman's lipstick on
Hmm.
the glass. And I rack from them walking to the glass of wine. And if you know the episode, the woman who told the story and had been drinking that wine basically was somebody who broke up a marriage.
Hmm.
So that glass sort of created this like visual foreboding moment. And for people who loved my episode, and I read all the Reddit stuff because I love knowing what fans think. So many people mentioned that shot. And so that shot accomplished exactly what I wanted, which is, oh fuck, is this couple gonna make it? Like, oh my God, that argument and that dinner scene and everything was so tense. And then ending on that last shot made it even more tense. Like I feel like I just watched a horror film. And that was exactly my intention. And it wasn't scripted. It's just something that I planned. And so it's so satisfying for me to know that like you guys notice these kinds of specials in whether it's my episode or somebody else's episode, because I mean, I literally stay up nights thinking about specials and dreaming about specials. So it's nice to know that like it's validated.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad to know that there's a word for it because I've always, if I had some other examples, I guess I've always kind of discredited the directors, like, oh, they always add this like little oomph to kind of accentuate like the scene,
That's the special, because otherwise it's
yeah,
basic coverage. And you're
right.
right. There are lots of directors who don't care too much about the camera. And I don't say that judgmentally, that's just not their style. They're all
Mm,
about the words, or they want to focus on the comedy. They actually don't want the camera to do too much. So the camera barely moves. And that's their style, kind of a lack of style, honestly. And then there are other directors who really try to do more with the camera to use it to tell the story. And I'm definitely more of the latter kind. I to me, that's the joy of directing. It's not just I get to help shape the words and be a part of editing, but really helping the audience. Sometimes it's a feeling. Sometimes, like, because there are no words. And when you can use those images to give a feeling to your audience, like, isn't that even more joyful and powerful? So I
Absolutely.
always strive for that.
Yeah, it's like added layers, just I feel Cameron Crowe did a lot of this as well. Like that's because I host or I've done other movie podcasts and I would always kind of talk about like some of the things that he did, maybe even directing, somebody to do something physically, just the added something else, just always just add something to it. Um, so even in direction, right? It's not necessarily just setup and some things. Like
Yeah,
I feel Runaway Jury for some reason just popped into my head. Are you
huh.
familiar with? So
No, I'm not.
oh, well, there's this really tense scene between Rachel Weisz and Gene Hackman on a public bus. I
Mm,
don't remember the words exchanged, but I think, he's trying to keep it kind of chill or whatever. And at this next stop, she gets off and it's really tense. And, as she like kind of gets away from his grip, she gives him one last glare as she's like walking off, and she didn't have to do that. And I think just that
mm,
added glare is was something kind of just kind of gave you a little bit more to kind
mm,
of process. So I don't know.
interesting.
I see it in actors too. I that just as a little ad. I don't know. Well, what can you talk about setting up the Stone's flashback inside the house? I noticed that the pregnant young lady didn't hold the gun properly. Finger was not on the trigger.
Totally intentional.
Right. Yeah.
We had a fucking awesome armorer on Twisted Metal, and she was this badass woman. And I grew up shooting and hunting. So it's actually always very important to me how people carry a gun. And if I notice that an actor isn't doing it correctly, I think about what their story is. Should they be holding it correctly? And she was exactly someone who would not hold it correctly. So I asked the armor, I said, make sure she holds it badly. And also her husband, let's make sure they look like absolute amateurs, you
Oh yeah.
know?
That
So good
thief.
catch, really
He's
good
a
catch,
thief.
Peter.
He stole the pornography magazine.
Yeah, we came up with that on the fly. It was hilarious.
I don't think I caught it on my first watch, maybe second or third, but I was just like, oh my God.
That
Uh,
was well during our concept meeting, that's when the idea first came up, was like, should he leave with the magazine? And then they had to go through and get clearances and everything. So yeah, that was really fun.
that reminds me of something I wanted to ask. A while back, you mentioned that you like to blow shit up and have like
Yes.
blood splatter if possible.
Yes.
With like the like prevalence and ease, I guess, of like using CG and things like that. Do you find it harder now to get like approved? Like, I really think that actual squibs would be better for this, or like, we can we really set this car on fire? Things
Yeah.
like that.
I've worked with squibs, I've worked with real fire, and I will say the CGI stuff that comes out of like for like all the gunfire we did was all CGI. I think it looks fantastic. Like
Oh yeah.
I don't really feel like squib work is that much better unless there's a really special shot that I need. But obviously, the violence in Twisted Metal is a little graphic, it's a little cartoony, right? It's not hyper realistic. And so I don't feel like we would have been serviced by squibs. And Tyler, the truth is, they're really time consuming, and you pretty much would only get one shot at it.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
would say if I were to use real practical squibs, it would be because of some like really specific shot where I felt like I was featuring something in a way that a squib would service me better than CGI.
Chest
Um,
really needs to explode.
yes. And then I feel like with VFX Fire, the truth is, guys, some companies do it better than others. I mean, like ILM, they're magicians, right? They can make look everything look good. But like sometimes I'll watch a show and the VFX fire looks so fucking bad. I'm like, did they just get that on like, photo stock or some like iStock thing? Like it just looks terrible. So
As
it
an
just,
app
Yeah.
on the phone.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, exactly. It's a Snapchat filter. Like sometimes the fire
Right.
just looks like that. So it just depends. But I would say overall, I felt like the quality of the vis effects on Twisted Metal was it was tonally right for what the show needed it to be.
Speaking of Snapchat filters, I don't know if it's still around, but did you see the Sweet Tooth one when the show first came out?
No,
It was
really?
on Instagram, and yeah, I did one and I shared it to my story. Yeah, I'll try to look on Instagram see if it's still available and I'll send it to you.
Okay,
Because
that's
I know
great. I
I
would,
think
oh, by
yeah
the
I
way,
think
you guys talked to Joe Samoa Joe.
no
Yeah,
I
What? Did
I
you
I
reach out
I
to
got to
have
him?
see him wrestle a few months ago.
he came
Awesome.
to our hometown. I honestly, I haven't reached out to Joe's people just because I don't. I'll try, because there's just some people I don't think I can get, so I don't. In my mind, I'm like, why bother?
I think
Like
you
the
could
really
get
high
Joe.
profile.
Well, first of all, he's the nicest dude. And
Okay.
he is such a unsung hero. I mean, obviously, even though he knew that his voice was going to be overdubbed, his physical performance is so outstanding. Like trying to direct somebody who's wearing a mask, like he had to bring so much emotion and physicality to his performance. And so not only was he always prepared, he always fucking nailed it. Like, and that level of dark humor and like that psycho humor, he was so good at it. Like he really had to do things like articulate his head and even make like the hair shake.
Hmm.
So I almost wish you could just see, like, be behind the scenes because you would just fucking bow down to that guy. He killed it. He
I'm still.
deserves so much credit for what he
That,
did with Sweet Tooth.
We want
that's
to
definitely
see
something we'd love to
clips.
see.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We want to see the clips with his voice.
Yeah. You know what? You're buddies with MJ, right? Tell MJ if you guys can get some of that stuff before it's overdubbed because it would blow you away.
Yeah, yeah. We'll see. I know he's busy with the announcement of season two, so um, yeah. I guess it wouldn't hurt to ask. Um,
Yeah.
Now, the flashback mall sequence, was that maybe like a different side of like the mall from the first episode? 'Cause I noticed, you still got like Anchor Blue, in the background, Radio Shack and stuff like that.
Yeah. We definitely had to recycle some locations, but I would say one of the fun inspirations out of like just out of the script, I already knew that I wanted to do some kind of interesting low angle 270-degree turn shot, like a steady cam shot. Because for me, very good production value and visual effects, just, if you give them the kind of shot where you're reducing the amount of editing you have to do. And so like the longer I could give him a mini oneer, where you would start to not only see the terror of young
Mm.
Stone, but also start to see that, Y2K is happening. Like I didn't know if they would use it as they wound up using it, and they did. They used it in the entirety of its turn because it was so dynamic.
It was really
So
good.
yeah, it's a great shot. I was really happy about that. And it's smashed to credits and him like just screaming in terror. It's so
Yeah.
good. Fun fact, we hired a real background actor who was missing a leg for that scene.
Oh, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I was about to ask about, yeah, some of the chaos that happens there. Yeah.
I think when you can and we're able to hire a differently abled actor for a scene, because of course I could just hire a stunt person and put a green sock on his leg and then remove his leg in post. But I asked the casting person, I'm like, if there are actors who are available who actually don't have a leg, I'd be really interested in hiring that person. And
Yeah,
that's who we
absolutely.
wound up hiring. So that person really had a great sense of humor. And he was like, I'm happy to be doing this scene. It's so nice to get work as an actor.
Yeah,
So
I
yeah.
know. They don't get they think about thought about enough. Think about. I did it. It's all right. The end of episode three, is kind of a nod to something in the video games. I believe, right, with Agent Stone having shot a little girl. Can you talk about that and the discussions about, what are we showing, and how far could you guys go?
Yes, lots of discussions about that. Look, MJ and I were both parents.
Mm,
And as much as we love hyperviolence, we also recognize that it's quite sensitive to show, a kid getting killed. And so, yes, in his moment of being unhinged, he overshoots, and of course, he didn't know that, there was a woman child hiding underneath. So we were like, should you see the foot of a child? And we ultimately decided less is more. Just we
mm,
had a shoe, so there was a shoe kind of in soft focus, and the teddy bear in the pool of blood from what we decided was going to be enough.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Just thinking about it, it's like,
Let's the viewer's brain fill it in.
mm,
That's right. Exactly. Your audience is smart. They can fill in plenty. So
and
yeah.
we as for me at least, like I appreciate stuff like that because I don't feel insulted. Like they're holding my hand, like they have to let me know what I'm supposed to be feeling at this point. I get it. There's a kid, and
Yeah.
so yeah, like it's not necessarily what you have to show us. It's like what just happened, so.
Well, I'm curious about your two reaction though. So Agent Stone realizes he's killed a couple of innocent people. What did you think of his reaction then? Because he kind of gets mad. He was like, "This is your fault. This is your fault." And you see the beginning of him, who he is today. But what did you think of that reaction? What does that say about him as a person?
Kind of like for me feels like almost a kind of the payoff to the setup from the beginning, where the girls are making fun of him, and he's just getting mad, and it's emasculated, insecure. And it's like through everything, then people come raid his house and they steal all the, steal his stuff. And it's just like finally he has this thing where he thinks that he's doing something and he's not doing the right thing, and it's like he can't accept it that like these are faults of his own. It's your fault. I push the blame onto you.
Right. Yeah.
Do you
I
do you feel sympathy for him?
I don't.
Mm,
When I saw that, that's like to me, like I'm a father of five. I have five of my own. Youngest one being three. The other one just turned five, so right in that age. And for me, it's like this motherfucker, like he wants to be so much like his dad that, like Tyler said, he's putting the blame on everyone else. It's like if you guys had just listened to me, this wouldn't happen. What I did, this was because of you guys, not me. Fuck you. Fuck,
Mhm. Yep,
that was
yep.
the vibe. So made no, not sympathetic at all. It reminds me of like the Judge Dredd, right? I am the law. Like this is
Mm-hmm.
that guy.
so
Mm-hmm.
it kind of it almost feels like more like pity. It's like yeah, you're like there's no real redeeming you. This is you are this person.
Right. Yes. Yeah, yeah. There's
No,
always
we're kind
that,
of
the age-old questions, are you already a monster that gets exposed or are monsters made?
all right. That's a question to answer. Um, and I know we're kind of running low on time with you, so we'll kind of like just kind of go through episode five if you still
Yeah,
willing
please,
to.
please.
Yeah. Episode five. I'm trying to think. So yeah, we have the ugly toenail man, and we talked a little bit about what he was wearing. When you went over the script and kind of read that, what were you? Do you remember your first initial thoughts?
Uh, I will say for both of my scripts, I was like, fuck yeah. I'm like, I get to blow some shit up. I get to stage an awesome massacre. I get to decapitate somebody. Like I was like, check, 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 check. So many things that I was like, hey, mom, like I couldn't wait to talk to my kids at the end of the night. Like, what did you do today? Well, I had two police officers piss on a dead body. That's how I started my morning.
I mean, can you kind of kind of talk about the DMV a little bit because episode five has that. Can you kind of tell us like the what its services, that
Yes. Well,
application?
number one, I always take mythology very, very seriously as a director. And if I'm introducing a new piece of mythology, I take that very seriously because it's, mythology is the very spine, the bones of really good genre storytelling. And also, if you're the one introducing it, it might come back again. So again, I take all of that very seriously. So one of the wonderful, easy things that I was able to lean into, MJ, is like the version of hell is DMV,
Mm.
right? Like in this funny world. And so I wanted to lean into all the tropes of DMV. A long line, it's boring, there's music, you feel like you're in purgatory, all the absurdity of the bureaucratic process. So yeah, so visually, I just really wanted to lean into that. The location that
Someone
we filmed at
screaming
was,
down the hall.
yes, the screaming down the hall, that was so fun. By the way, that's a special. There was so many ways in which I could have somebody screaming down a hall. I could have shot it over Anthony and Stephanie's shoulder, them looking down a long hallway with long lines. But instead, I did a low angle shot so that your foreground were these lines, and then I'm pushing towards them for their reaction. So that's a special. Nobody said you should do that shot. I wanted to do that shot. It had nothing to do with their coverage. But those kinds of shots that make you feel like oh shit, there's some stakes here.
Mm. Yeah,
Anyway, yeah, that was a really fun location. And by the way, just FYI, from a location standpoint, like it could not have been better. Like I don't want to disclose what that location was, but the moment I saw it, I was like, yep, this looks like an elevated DMV.
nice. Yeah, yeah. And Taj even talked about the lady that worked at the DMV and how she was just like her tone and speech and cadence or whatever, that she just kind of
Yeah.
nailed it.
Yeah, initially she was almost giving it a little too much spin, and I had to remind her, you say this 100 times a day, and you don't give a shit about the person that you're saying this to, right? Like DMV, right? You know you have to do this 100 more fucking times.
So funny. You mentioned decapitation. Can you talk about that scene? If I remember correctly, I believe again Stacey Perry mentioned that wasn't even like the mold of the actor's head, right? It was just another head that they had on hand or something. Do you kind of remember that?
Yes, from a budgetary standpoint, it just made more sense to use a head that already, existed. And so we were just careful about not, showing it too much. But I also think there were a lot of internal conversations about how gruesome we wanted to get with it. And as you've already heard me mention, I'm a huge fan of the boys. So for me, my dream was to go that far. And I think we fell a slightly more comical, cartoony version of a decapitation instead of a more like graphic and photorealistic version of one. But I think the intention of the scene is to show how fucking crazy Sweet Tooth is, you know. And so and also it's Stuart and Sweet Tooth's meet cute.
Right. Yeah.
When you
Yeah,
think about
yeah,
it.
it is. It is absolutely is.
Yeah. And so that's really the intention of the scene. And so I loved all of Mitch's ad libs. He had so many great ad libs there. Yeah, a lot. I think that quite a bit, like after the clapping, everything was ad libbed by him.
Do you remember anything that didn't make it into the final edit?
Oh God, he had so many good ones. He was always killing us, like making the crew laugh so hard. But like, great, you just cut off someone's head. That's fantastic. And just like his reaction, like, is this normal? Oh my God, help me. We're clapping for somebody who just cut off someone's head.
Let's stick with Stu and the sequence when he has to walk Quiet and John Doe to that door, that ledge that goes to nowhere.
Mm.
It was a lot of that on paper as well, or is that also Mike Mitchell
Yeah,
kind of?
that was on paper, but the interpretation of how to do it and how to do it efficiently for screen, that was given to, I had the responsibility of figuring out, how to do this on our budget. And so I think we actually did a really great job, and also with help of visual effects, that really awesome push with the open the door and the looking down, like you're near the Hoover Dam. I thought the visual effects shot there turned out great. Just even the details of like the holes in the door, and then using a lot of atmosphere and hard light to push through those bullet holes to really emphasize that, right? These are the conversations a director has with the DP about how you want that moment to look. How much blood should be on the door? Are they always forcing people or beating people to make them, walk through that door? And so, yeah, so many emails about all those little details. Yeah, super
Yeah,
fun.
I'm gonna
A
look
fun
at the door
little
again.
thing to share with you.
Yes.
There's really fun ad lib that we did with Stu, where his guy Taj is like, we got to man up, right? We got to be good, right? And like he gives him a fist bump, and he goes, yeah, yeah, and he goes like this, and he goes,
Uh,
and he's like, what's that? He's like, oh, that's American Sign Language for balls, big balls.
right.
And look on Taj's face is so funny. Anyway, that was a total improv.
Okay.
My son Hudson was visiting New Orleans with his friend Finn. And for whatever reason, the two of them decided to start learning funny sign language. And they taught me that in American Sign Language, this means
Oh,
testicles. You could also do this.
okay.
Testicles.
That's
Looks like
amazing because
testicles.
Tyler, didn't we kind of look that up like in our recap, like while
Uh,
recording?
y- yeah, I think we looked that up and mentioned it. Yeah, because I initially thought that it was a reference to the episode of Friends.
Same,
Where
that's what we were thinking. The Gellers.
yeah,
Fuck
I think
you,
that's
like
stuff that's
because
like
they were
fuck
doing
you,
that,
yeah.
like fuck you, fuck yeah.
So it was sort of a misinterpreted combination of balls, because American Sign Language, it really is this.
Mhm.
That's really balls, but then also friends. So it's like a
Okay,
fucked up interpretation of it.
yeah, yeah.
Anyway, it was so silly, but those little details, at least for me, like I always love to tell actors, like especially if they're supposed to be friends, I always say to them, even if I never shoot it, I want you two to come up with a secret handshake.
Mm,
And I asked the two of them to come up with a secret handshake on day one. I was like, because I don't know how and when I'll use it, but it just deepens that connection, you know?
yeah, I do like it. Um, I even asked Taj to go, is Stu the type of guy Mike would have at the cookout? He's like, yeah, of course, so that's how tight those characters are up in Seattle. Um,
Right.
now,
So, by the way,
yeah,
speaking of secret handshakes, again, like nobody would know this, but those of us who are working on it. So, Stu, they have a secret handshake, and then when he first meets, oh, what's that character played by is it not Jenkins? It's the
Shepard,
guy, yeah, Shepard.
Shepard, Jared Benkins.
Yeah, Jared. Oh, Jared's so good. He's so fantastic. There's a moment where Stu's sitting in the car and he's cleaning out, the car, and he sees Jenkins walk up behind, or Shepard walk up behind, and they do the secret handshake, and it
Ah,
makes me feel jealous because that's
ah,
their secret handshake.
because because it cuts to Stu reacting to that. See, so
Yes.
I overlooked that. I was just all like, he's jealous because we saw this in the previous episode where he's watching Mike kind of like get along with all these other guards.
Right.
So Tyler, if you have something coming up, my last question for you is the death of Agent Shepard,
Oh,
right? That's episode 3.
uh,
5.
That is that 5? Well, does that happen in her episodes? Am I? I
wait.
thought I,
Oh, I
I
thought it
thought
was 5.
Shepard.
Maybe it is 3.
Yes,
I,
yes. Agent Shepard dies in 5. It is my episode.
oh, it's in 5. Or
Yeah, it's in 5.
but he he gets killed
Wait, is it in
by
5?
Dwight. But that was
It is
3.
in 5,
It might
right?
be
I
3.
think he's only in 3 episodes, the first 3 episodes.
What?
I could
Shit.
be wrong. Shit.
Um, well, first
Need
of
to rewatch.
all,
Yeah.
I, I I love killing characters off. It's exciting. And what a send-off, because he was kind of this slimy perv, right? And he was always
Mhm.
like making jerk off faces to
All the time.
Stephanie
Sure.
Weber. Yeah. I mean, and by the way, the actor could not be lovelier. It's funny that he plays these slimy characters because in real life, he's like the sweetest guy.
Yeah.
But knowing that I was going to kill off that character, I wanted him to lean into all the pervy stuff. Let's have a good death. So let's motivate that good death. So it's going to be delicious when we kill off this slimy motherfucker. So it was a really interesting scene where Stephanie had to beat the brains out of this essentially a device that was squirting blood in her face.
Oh yeah.
And holy cow, there was blood everywhere. I had like blood on all my clothes and on my shoes for days. It got everywhere. Um, and yeah, how appropriate. He's like jerking off. He's in the middle of jerking off when we kill him. It's just, it was a
In his
perfect death.
boss's office of all places.
I know, right? But like, how ballsy was he when he sees it's her? He actually lifts the magazine. So again, this was one of those things where we could have shown more or less. I felt like having details like being low angle with the open magazine and the pants around his ankles and blood splashing everywhere, and he's getting beaten to death, and you're just seeing his feet jerking the blood. To me, that's enough.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
that. You didn't
I
see
thought
that
so.
much, really, right?
Yeah. I don't remember if we asked Jared about this, but for that sequence, I know he wasn't revealing anything. Was there an intimacy coordinator necessary for that?
No, because I told him, I said, look, I don't need to see your balls.
Okay.
I mean,
Put those
I'm
away,
sure your
Jared.
balls are really lovely, but yeah. So again, I'm already planning ahead in terms of like, what's that edit? What's that moment that I know I want to cut to sort of speak of this moment? This just came to my mind, but I directed an episode of iZombie years ago.
Mm. Oh.
There
Mhm.
was a scene where a bunch of humans go and sorry, a bunch of zombies go kill some humans. And rather than just showing them killing the humans and mowing them down, I actually, because you see them pull out the gun and start shooting. So, like on a raking shot, you see the guns firing. But then I cut to a pillow with blood splattering all over it. It's simple. It's also obviously CW, so like I really
Right.
wasn't allowed to show too much, but the pillow was the name of the whorehouse. So I asked for that pillow. That pillow had to be made for me just so I could splash blood on it because I knew it would be my last shot of the scene.
You
So
do think ahead. Yeah.
you have to, because I
Yeah.
had to get the name of a whorehouse cleared just so that I could have the pillow made.
Right. That's amazing. Now, aside here, did you ever meet Bob Dearden, who was one of the writers on iZombie?
No, I
Bob
never
Dearden? No, okay. Yeah,
know.
he also writes for Cobra Kai and Obliterated, so like he knows
Oh.
MJ as well. I was just kind of wondering.
John Embaum, who
Mm,
went on to, who also does Party Down,
mm,
and Dan Etheridge. So I worked with those two guys on Party Down as well.
okay.
But I loved working with fuck, what's his name? I almost said Rob Zombie, but it's not Rob Zombie.
Thomas.
Oh yeah, Rob Thomas. Yeah, such a nice guy.
Yeah.
Super nice guy.
Tyler, anything else from you?
Nothing specific. Is Bob Odenkirk as nice as he seems like he is?
He
He
is
seems
such a
like the nicest guy.
great guy. I adored him. I loved working with him. He's so freaking creative. He's super inclusive. He's really collaborative, and he's generous in a way that is difficult to describe. For example, a lot of times when you're looking at a scene, everybody wants the blow. The blow is the last line or the punch line or like the funny thing that gets you out of the scene. And sometimes he'd be reading the scene and he's like, I don't think I should have the blow. I think Murray should have it. And then he would give it to his co-star, Murray Enos. Or, another like with Cedric Yarborough, or we had such an amazing cast. Suzanne Cryer, Nancy Robertson. I mean, who else do we have? Oh my God, why am I blanking on his name? I can see him. He's the voice of Batman. He's
Oh,
beloved.
Oh,
Diedrich,
Kevin Conroy?
oh,
No.
Bader.
Diedrich Bader.
Oh,
Diedrich
oh.
Bader. Oh my God. The scenes with him and Diedrich Bader and Lucky Hank are so amazing. I don't know if you guys saw any of Lucky Hank, but if you want to
No.
watch
Saw the
episodes,
first
episodes
two.
105 and 106. Okay, so a lot of people on Reddit watched my episodes and they were like, how come the rest of Lucky Hank doesn't look like 5 and 6? So Pete Farrelly directed the pilot. He's fucking Pete Farrelly.
Mhm.
But Pete Farrelly, interestingly enough, is not really about moving the camera all that much. He is really about like the words and the performance. And so speaking of directors who don't, who's like, I don't want the camera to do too much. That's a choice. So I just want to say, if you like Bob Odenkirk, just keep watching the show
Yeah.
because it it really becomes a tour de force performance. And in my episode, like some huge reveals happen. So it's
I'll
worth
definitely keep
watching.
with it.
Yeah, yeah.
Sold. I'm sold. I'll definitely check it out. Jude, we kind of talked about it off mic before we started. Anything you'd like to promote as we wrap up here? Some upcoming episodes on the shows that you've done.
Oh, you're so nice. Well, let's see. My episode of Quantum Leap just aired last Tuesday. And it's a very special episode of Quantum Leap. And so people who are fans of that show, I would definitely recommend they watch it because not only will you get all your classic, Quantum Leap stuff, it's also sort of uh, a treasure hunt as well. So it's got strong Goonies and Indiana Jones vibes, which is just so fun to do. And there's a story element in it. I don't want to spoil anything, even though it's out, but I want people to see it. That is very special. And yeah, and I will say polarizing. There's been a lot of talk of this last episode on Reddit, and there's some people who love it, and there's some people who are like, TV's getting too woke. So I'd be very curious to know what you think.
Okay, absolutely. Like I was a huge fan of the original run, and since I cover so many shows, I don't have time to really digest like something for myself,
Yeah.
as a viewer. And so that I'm glad I'm just friends with the hosts of Quarterly Podcasts because I'll be often asking me like, hey, what about this week? Are you available?
Yeah.
And so hopefully I get to make a return, but I'm still in season one right now, and I need to catch up because it's a show I've been waiting for 20 some odd 30 years. So
Well, I will say one more thing about working on Twisted Metal. It was such a blast. What an amazing cast. Um, and it really, they always say it begins with number one. And number one on that call sheet was Anthony Mackie. And that dude better become the mayor of New Orleans one day. It's so clear how much he loves his city, but he shows up on set and he's just like chit-chatting with the crew. He doesn't have to do that. I mean, that guy's a movie star, but he is the most down to earth, the nicest person who would like regale us with tales of growing up poor in New Orleans. And like, my God, what a joy to be around that man. And so that show, I mean, he's the heart of that show. And just, yeah, it was a real privilege to get to work on that. And Stephanie Beatrice, what a dream too. I mean, just great cast all around.